Hello again, everyone. And let me just repeat the title of the side event again, Transforming Food, Land and Water Systems for Sustainable Healthy Diets. Good afternoon from Rome, but a very early good morning to many of our speakers who are joining in from different locations at ungodly hours. Thank you so much for getting up and taking part despite your busy schedules. And of course, to the audience joining us, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're logging in from. My name is Thin, and I'm a specialist food and climate journalist, and I'm delighted to be the moderator for this event. Now, just a few notes on housekeeping before we begin proper. This event is being recorded, and the recording will be available online afterwards for anyone who wanted to attend but couldn't make it. If you have any questions for our speakers, please use the Q&A box, and please identify yourself and your organization if possible. Presentations and the discussions will be in English. Unfortunately, translation is not available. Now, back to the task at hand. For the next 90 minutes, we are going to be discussing how we can transform our food, land, and water systems to achieve diets that are both sustainable and healthy. Now, in the last few years, we've heard about the role of food systems in exacerbating climate change, contributing to all forms of malnutrition, and leading to shocking declines in biodiversity. But we also need food systems. I always say that you can choose not to own a mobile phone or a car, but you cannot afford not to eat. The right to adequate food and nutrition is a human right. Yet, as we all know, far too many people are going hungry, and the COVID-19 crisis has worsened the situation. But if there is one silver lining, it is that the pandemic has revealed the inadequacies of our current food systems. It has created an awareness on all the different dimensions of food, and many people are realizing that food is right at the center of this nexus between the environment, nutrition, and health. Now, just a couple of weeks ago, we had the first ever Food System Summit, and there was a consensus that food systems need to be transformed urgently. And we're hoping to build on that momentum this afternoon to talk about providing diets that are good for both human and planetary health. And we want to talk about this from a diversity of perspectives and localities because, and I cannot stress this enough, not all food systems are the same. What is good for an urbanite with access to a wide range of foods might not be good for many people in the rural South who might have issues around accessibility and affordability. Well, we have 6 fantastic speakers who will be sharing their insights on these topics with us. They will each give a short presentation, after which there'll be a moderated discussion. This will be followed by a Q&A with questions from the audience. We will then end today's event with closing remarks from Stineke Unema, who is the Executive Secretary of UN Nutrition. Now, without much further ado, let me welcome our first keynote speaker, Shakuntala Tilsted, who is, of course, this year's World Food Prize winner. Shakuntala is also the global lead in nutrition and public health at WorldFish, and she's going to be setting the scene for today's discussion. Shakuntala?
Thank you so much, Thin, for your opening remarks and for opening today's discussion on the importance of a holistic transformation of food, land, and water systems for sustainable diets that nourish all peoples and our planet. Let me start with a harsh reality. Currently, 3 billion people do not have access to a healthy diet, and the majority of these live in low and middle-income countries. As you mentioned, the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic are pushing more people into poverty, more people losing their income, and increasing numbers of hungry and undernourished people. The gap between those who can afford a nutritious diet and those who cannot is growing. and with the most vulnerable people, including women and young children, hit hardest. Last year, UNICEF, the World Health Organization, and the World Bank released data showing that the number of children stunted, wasted, and the number of overweight, both adults and children, which is also a manifestation of malnutrition, continue to grow. And without bold action, we will not meet our 2030 targets to nourish all peoples. Ensuring equitable access to diverse, nutritious, safe, and culturally acceptable foods for all is central to food systems transformation. Of particular importance is securing healthy diets in the first 1,000 days of life for pregnant and lactating women and young children, which is fundamental for well-nourished people throughout their lifetime and even intergenerational. For many people in low and middle-income countries, diverse aquatic foods like fish, crustacean, and seaweeds, and animal source foods like milk, meat, eggs are central to local diets, livelihoods, and cultures. These diverse foods are not only rich in protein, but also rich in micronutrients, minerals and vitamins, and essential fatty acids, all crucial to human health and development. We must include these narratives, we must include these foods in the narratives we build about sustainable, healthy diets and what this means to different peoples and different regions. In a bid to do this, UN Nutrition released 2 discussion papers this year. One examining the role of aquatic foods, and the other on livestock products in sustainable, healthy diets. These discussion papers present findings showing that both aquatic foods and terrestrial animal source foods must be central to research, policies, and investments to transform food, land, and water systems for sustainable, healthy diets. In today's discussions, our speakers will provide insights on how both these food groups are key to achieving our commitments of the UN Food Systems Summit 2021 and the CFS guidelines. Our speakers will present successful examples of government and private sector programs that include these foods to improve the access of nutritious and sustainable diets among vulnerable populations. Now I will provide some context about the role of aquatic foods in sustainable, healthy diets. And then my colleague Laura will provide an overview of terrestrial animal source foods. Aquatic foods, the diverse animals, plants, and microorganisms harvested and farmed from marine and inland waters, are superfoods. They provide over 3 billion people with a crucial nutrient-rich food source. More than just protein, aquatic foods provide critical micronutrients, vitamins and minerals, and omega-3 fatty acids that are essential to well-nourished populations. And as I mentioned before, this is extremely important for the cognitive development of children in the first 1,000 days of life. Over 800 million, half of whom are women, depend on aquatic food systems, including captive fisheries and aquaculture and their supply chains for vital income opportunities. Demand for aquatic foods continue to grow, especially in low and middle income countries. Of course, that's where we have also the greatest world population. In fact, fish consumption is rising at a yearly growth rate that is outpacing both world population expansion and the rise in meat consumption. Despite this global growth, many vulnerable populations, like women and young children, are not eating sufficient amounts of aquatic foods to have the full nutritional benefits. These highly nutritious foods from water can be produced at low carbon emissions and environmental impacts compared to many land-based foods. By sustainably and inclusively increasing the supply and consumption of aquatic foods, we can have multiple ways. We can improve access to nutritious foods, lower the environmental footprint of our global food systems, and at the same time, provide equitable livelihoods for the world's most vulnerable. To do this, we must make sure that aquatic foods are central to our food systems agenda at global, regional, and national levels. During the UN Food Systems Summit 2021, aquatic food fishers, farmers, processors, and traders joined with researchers and politicians to make their collective call. We cannot afford to overlook the potential of aquatic foods to nourish all people and our planet. This call led to aquatic foods being named among the summit top 7 priority areas of action by the Science Group for the UN Food Systems Summit 2021. As part of this, several action coalitions were formed, uniting efforts of member states, UN agencies, research institutions, NGOs, the private sector, and all peoples to accelerate our progress. One of these coalitions was on aquatic foods, and this cross-sectional coalition focuses on accelerating the integration of aquatic foods into food and nutrition security programs at all levels. Another action coalition was formed on school feeding programs, a critical way to deliver nutritious, healthy meals to children. And there was another coalition on healthy diets. So aquatic foods must be central to all these coalitions. Our speakers today will look at the place where these 3 coalitions meet and explore how they fit into the CFS voluntary guidelines, the right to adequate food, and food systems and nutrition, and ensure that there is access to sustainable, healthy food for all. Our speakers will also explore the examples in which dried small fish-based products, such as fish chutney and fish powder, offer an accessible, affordable, and culturally appropriate way to provide more micronutrients in the daily meals of women and children. At the same time, these solutions offer new opportunities for women to make a living. To harness the full benefits of aquatic foods, governments must make the link between food and agriculture and nutrition and health. For example, this can be done by including aquatic foods in national food-based dietary guidelines. Governments can ensure thereby that aquatic foods are prioritized in school feeding programs and mother and child health care programs that reach the most vulnerable. I want to leave you with the bright possibility. Evidence shows that aquatic food systems can provide more than 6 times more food than they do today. And this increase in supply could prevent 166 million cases of micronutrient deficiencies by 2030. So let us prioritize aquatic foods in our global food systems research agenda and support sustainable and inclusive management and innovations that are needed to realize this potential. Thank you all for giving me this opportunity to address you. And thank you, Thin, over to you.
Thank you so much, Shakuntala, for setting that scene and, emphasizing the role of aquatic foods. And I think a lot of the times when we discuss about healthy diets, sustainable diets, there's a lot of emphasis and focus on land-based agriculture systems, and we tend to forget about aquatic foods. So thank you for that. I'm now going to welcome Laura Iannotti, who is the Associate Professor at Washington University in St. Louis, who is going to be talking about leveraging livestock to combat malnutrition. Laura?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for everyone. Thank you so much, Tim, for the introduction. And
sorry, Laura, could you speak a little bit louder? Just we're having trouble hearing you.
Sure. It's a real honor to be with you all. It's a pleasure to speak to you today, but especially to follow Dr. Filstead. I joke with her that she's a rock star, and I mean it. So it's a real honor to follow her. I'm director of the E3 Nutrition Lab, which is based at Washington University in St. Louis, and we focus on animal source foods as a group, but in the context of diverse and high quality diets. We design public health interventions that uphold the three principles of our E's, which is environmental sustainability, evolutionarily appropriate, and equitably access. We have research sites in Ecuador, and Kenya, but today I'm going to talk to you about some of our global policy work on terrestrial livestock-derived foods. This was done with ILRI and UN Nutrition, and as Dr. Filstead mentioned, I'll be highlighting some of the key messages from the UN discussion paper, livestock-derived foods and sustainable healthy diets. Dr. Filstead has already pointed to some of the disturbing trends that we are seeing post-COVID, arising from the economic shocks that are reverberating from the pandemic, but also arising from conflict and climate change. It's the first time in a long time we've seen some of these trends reversed, and we need to be disturbed and motivated into action. I'm going to leave you with three key messages, and I'm going to talk through these themes as I go through. The first is that livestock-derived foods are essential in certain phases of the life course. As Dr. Filstead mentioned already, in the first 1,000 days of life, during pregnancy, lactation, infancy, childhood, and for the elderly, and often neglected population. Livestock-derived foods and animal source foods more broadly show great disparities in consumption around the world. Stark nutrition inequities are globally prevalent, and we need to strive for better balance. And the third message pertains to animal source foods and planetary health. So while livestock production can bring significant challenges to environmental sustainability, it can also offer opportunities, and I'll discuss a few of those. So
Laura, sorry, could you speak a little bit louder, please? I think some of the audience are having trouble hearing you.
Okay. Okay, the first key message, animal source foods are critical during certain phases of the life course. So animal source foods, livestock-derived foods, and fish are nutrient dense and contain vital nutrients that are highly bioavailable. That means that they are powerful nutritionally in abundance and in scarcity. So in certain phases, human beings require these foods to support rapid growth and development, but also for health, functioning, and maintenance. One critical period is that first 1,000 days of life. Infants and young children have limited gastric capacity. They have small stomachs, so they therefore require efficient absorption. Nutrients and thousands of discovered and yet to be discovered bioactive compounds are found in animal source foods. Vitamin A is one of the best examples. It comes delivered as retinol, which is absorbed 12 to 24 times more efficiently than carotenoids found in plant-based foods. But this is similar for other nutrients and the bioactive factors. Iron, zinc, choline. Vitamin B12 is the predominant source, comes from livestock-derived foods, in fact. We draw on epidemiological evidence to show the health benefits and disadvantages coming from livestock-derived foods. Although there have been relatively few intervention studies in young children, they have demonstrated that, in fact, animal source foods promote growth and development. Our trial in Ecuador showed large effects on linear growth, reducing stunting, as well as increasing biomarkers of brain development. There's, of course, the well-known studies coming out of Kenya that showed evidence for the effects, positive effects for school children. But there's also evidence in adult populations for negative health outcomes from processed foods, and to a lesser extent, red meat. More evidence is still needed for the elderly. So moving to the second key message, the level of consumption depends on context and food system. There are large consumption disparities globally in livestock-derived food consumption patterns. We've seen increasing consumption, notably for poultry meat and eggs, but these average consumption levels vary dramatically by region. The average European consumes around 69 kilograms of meat compared to 10 kilograms for an African. We did an analysis of egg consumption in children less than 2 years of age, finding that in Latin America, 37% had received eggs the previous day, compared to only 12% in Africa and 29% in Asia. Food systems need to be transformed for greater balance and equity. And finally, the third message pertains to sustainable livestock production, presenting both challenges and opportunities. We know that livestock production, generally at the industrial level, contributes to greenhouse gas emissions, approximately 14.5%. The livestock sector also is implicated primarily through feed production in freshwater use and biodiversity losses. But there are some debates about these calculations and the emphasis on factory farming or industrial production. In nutrition, we are developing some new metrics that measure greenhouse gas emissions by nutrient density and showing an entirely different story when it relates to animal source foods. And so for the—
Sorry, Laura, you have a little bit less than a minute. Sorry to interrupt you and rush you.
I'm just about finished. So in terms of mixed production systems that integrate agriculture and livestock, there's great opportunity, as well as creating the efficiencies through improved feed conversion rates, appropriate animal breeds, and protecting animal health. So to conclude, the implications of livestock-derived foods depend on context, life course phase, and production system. LDFs provide critical nutrients and bioavailable nutrient matrices, and we need to ensure access for children, pregnant and lactating women, and the elderly. Nutrition inequities prevail, notably LDF apparent dietary intake patterns, and we need better balance in our food systems. And finally, in terms of planetary health, LDF production has serious impacts on the environment, but there are also opportunities to mitigate climate change and environment. If we rebalance food systems, support sustainable mixed production systems, we can safeguard human, animal, and planetary health. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. And of course, livestock is in a way, controversial topic when we're talking about nutrition and climate change, and the debate tends to be very black and white. So thank you for adding that nuance and evidence, from the ground to the discussion. It is now my pleasure to invite Adeline Ufitinima, who is from the Rwanda National Child Development Agency. She's going to be talking about a really interesting program in her country. Now, Adeline's calling in from Rwanda, and she might not be able to switch on her video because of the connection, but we hope we can still hear you and listen to your presentation. Adeline?
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you in this very important event. And I'm pleasure to talk more about the very interesting program we've had here in Rwanda about the Girinka program and the Gabura Makamubyeyi intervention. Girinka program is a program initiated by the government of Rwanda in 2006, headed by His Excellency Paul Kagame, among the vulnerable households. It has two main objectives. The first one was reducing poverty through dairy cattle farming. The second one was improving livelihoods through increased milk consumption and income generation. Gabura Mata Mubyeyi project was a randomized controlled trial, which was implemented in 2 districts of Rwanda called Nyabihu and Ruhango. It has the aim of assessing the effect of the Girinka program on milk consumption and nutritional status of children. It has also an aim of assessing the effect of SCBCC interventions on milk consumption, dietary diversity, nutritional status of young children in Girinka households. There were 2 groups. The first one was an intervention group, and there was also a control group. The intervention groups received the animal source food consumption SPCC messages, and 2,029 households have had a cow plus SBCC. On the control group, we have had 2,029 households with a Girinka cow only, without the SPCC intervention, and 2,029 without a Girinka cow but eligible for cow. After this program was tested in a period of 9 months in the 2 districts with collaboration with community health workers at village level. They were the ones providing the messages, and the messages were around the 6 key elements. The 6 key elements. The first one was based more on importance and benefits of cow's milk and animal source food consumption for pregnant and lactating women and young children. Also, the messages was focusing on appropriate daily quantities of animal source food consumption and cow's milk for pregnant and lactating women and young children. The message also focuses on times to introduce animal source food and cow's milk for pregnant and lactating women and young children. Also, the messages was around the importance of identifying symptoms of milk allergy and intolerance and the actions to take, the importance of hygiene and safe handling and storage of fresh milk, as well as the importance of male engagement for maternal and child nutrition and increase of cow's milk and animal source food consumption. Male engagement is very key in improvement of nutritional status of children, as the males are the head of the household. They are very key in contributing to the nutrition, healthy nutritious food for children in order to improve or to make sure that their nutritional status is improved. Among those households that were selected, we used to make sure that there is a children from 12 to 29 months in the household. And also they have received Girinha on the intervention group. They have received the Girinha in at least from 2017. And also the involvement of community health workers in transmission of these messages was very key in the program. After this 60 months of this trial, it has seen that the frequency of consumption of milk among those children has improved. And also the maternal knowledge on animal source food consumption has improved during that period. This means that, as we may see on the graphs here, there was an 8% increase on frequency of weekly milk consumption among children in the intervention groups compared to Girinha only beneficiaries. As the National Child Development Agency, we believe that animal source food consumption accompanied with SBCC on animal source food consumption is very key, because it encourages the families to not only thinking on gaining financially from those livestock they were given, specifically the Girinha, but also thinking on how they may improve the nutritional status, nutritional outcomes of their children from the consumption of those animal source food. And also fight against malnutrition and stunting. The recent data we have had on the stunting rates among under 5 years children in Rwanda, we are still at 33% of stunted children by this 2020 Rwanda Demographic Health Survey. This means that we are still have a lot to do, as we have a target of achieving 19% of stunted children under 5 years by 2024.
Adeline, sorry to interrupt you. You have less than 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. We believe that the SBCC intervention on animal source food consumption will contribute more on improving the nutritional status of the children. And also we want to focus more on male engagement for them to contribute more to the improvement of nutritional status of children. Thank you once again for this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adeline, and so glad that you were able to switch on the video and that the connection has held. And of course, thanks for explaining to us in detail about the program on the ground. It's really these kind of evidence and local based programs that sort of add richness to the discussion we're having today. I'd now like to welcome Julie Bissonnette, who is also the president of Young Farmers of Quebec. Now, she is going to be sharing her experience as a farmer and a youth. Julie?
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, thank you for the invitation, and I'm very happy to talk with you this morning. Good evening, good afternoon, bon matin à tous. So first of all, I'm a president of FRAC, Fédération de la Relève Agricole du Québec, Young Farmer in Quebec. And I'm also vice chair of CYFF, Canadian Young Farmer Forum. And I'm a member of Union des producteurs agricoles, UPA. But first of all, I'm a dairy farmer. So I work with my husband. We milk 50 cows, and we start our own farm 7 years ago. So I'm a dairy farmer in Quebec, province of Canada. So I work for a young farmer, but first of all, I am one, and I will talk with you this morning about what is our issues and what is our reality. So I decided to choose difficulties that is everywhere on the planet, but the solutions are not the same, but the issues are. So I will talk with you about land access, funding and access, and climate change. First of all, land access is a big issue for here and everywhere. It's not the same, like I told you, it's not the same solution everywhere, but it's a problem most of the part. So first of all, the cost is too much for us. So we have land, but it's hard to get it. So there is a urban sprawl that not helps. So less land are available, and we need land to feed our cows, to feed our animals. So that's a big issue. Also, the funding access to the incomes are stagnant, and the spending are increased most of the time. So that costs a lot to be a young farmer, to work with to farm. So that's another issue. It's a lot of money, and we at the end of the year, it's hard to have money. So that's a big part also. And the last one, it's climate change. Us this summer we saw a really big difference. It was very dry. So about the water management, the research, natural research, to be sure that we are trying to have new solutions, because it will be a big long term. It's not like just short like now. It would be a long term issue. So for us, we need to be alone at our farm. It's very big. We need to have research. We need to be to have help to find other solution, to find other practices. So that's a big. It will be it is, but it will be a big reality that we have to work with. And also about climate change, we are the solution with our land. Also, we work our land. It's the first thing that we work with. We take care of it, and we want to be sure that it will be for the next generation, like the others do it for us. So that's a solution, and we have to work together also to be sure that the land can help for the planet if we want them. So that's the three big part of the issues and what we have to work with every day. So for the conclusion, this was also my reality and my wishes for the future, to be sure that we will. It's a big part. We have to work with it, but we can be sure that it's not bigger than this. And also, as a young farmer, we are the foundation of the food system. So that's why I'm talking with you this morning about the issues and the difficulties that we have. And if our difficulties are too bigger, all the food system also will have the consequence of this, because we need young farmer who loves agriculture. It's a life for agriculture. We work every day. So if young farmer doesn't want to work on the farm, or doesn't, it's like it's too difficult, we will not have young farmer, and we have to take care of them, and to be sure that it will be easier. It's not it will always have obstacles like everywhere, but to make sure that young farmer loves them life, the agriculture, and to be sure that they will produce food and to take care of the land. So that was my part for the young farmer. Thank you.
Merci, Julie. And there are so many things that you said, that I can just follow up on. We'll come back to you during the moderate discussion to sort of, further explain some of the points that you made, but I think it's really interesting and important to hear from the younger generation. You know, whenever we have these discussions around farming and agriculture, there's always talk about how, you know, the farmers population, you know, aging, and I think it's so important that we have a new generation that can take over and are willing to do it, you know, so that the obstacles are not insurmountable. Thank you so much again. Let me now invite Arun Padilla, who is the project manager of sustainable aquaculture at WorldFish, and he's also going to be talking about a really interesting case study.
Thank you, Tim. Can you hear me, Tim?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, greetings from India. I'm glad to have this opportunity to speak about the essential role of locally sourced aquatic foods in sustainable and healthy diets of vulnerable communities in Odisha province of India. Working with the state government of Odisha and USA, WorldFish has successfully included locally sourced aquatic foods in government-run nourishment programs. This is revolutionizing the fight against malnutrition while providing vital income opportunities, especially for women. This success came by applying nutrition-sensitive approaches to aquatic food systems, which put nutrition and health outcomes at the center. Odisha, a coastal state in eastern India, has a population of over 43 million, where 29% of children below 6 years are stunted, which is a form of undernourishment. Despite its great aquatic food resources, not enough nutritious fish are making it onto the plates of those who need it the most. The state has a massive supplementary nutrition program targeting women and children under the Integrated Child Development Services of the Government of Odisha. In this program, 4.24 million children below 6 years of age and pregnant and lactating women are getting benefited. By taking a nutrition-sensitive approach, WorldFish worked at multi-entry of food system from production to consumption to boost the availability, affordability, and access to aquatic foods, mostly targeting the vulnerable section in the community. Our partnership with the state government enabled women-centric policies and schemes that massively encouraged women's self-help groups to take up nutrition-sensitive fish farming, production of hygienic and safe solar-dried marine fish, and its marketing for income generation and household nutrition. We worked with the women self-help groups to pilot and scale pond polyculture in homestead ponds and community water tanks, which are also locally known as Gram Panchayat tanks. In the pond polyculture system, both small fish and big carp varieties are grown together. This meant more fish to eat and sell, boosting both nutrition and income at household levels. Small fish such as mola are extremely high in multiple nutrients, which are essential for cognitive development of children and are a superfood in the fight against malnutrition. Another major win came to us when the Women and Child Development Department of Government of Odisha realized the nourishing value of the dried fish and included it in the state's Anganwadi, that means Child Care Center, Children and Mother Feeding Program. The program successfully piloted the fish-based nutrition in 50 Anganwadi centers for 6 months of this year, from April to September, involving about 2,000 children and mothers. Hot cooked meals blended with fish powder was served to children of 3 to 6 years age group, and take-home ration with dried fish packets was distributed to pregnant and lactating women and also to adolescent girls. This project has proven a successful way to improve access to nutritious, safe food and is set to be expanded. What led to the success? As much as fish was a game-changing solution, I can say that the partnerships across government departments and national technical institutes was a key driver to our success. This was a big convergence program involving 6 line departments of government of Odisha, including Fishery Department, Agriculture Department, Panchayati Raj and Drinking Water Department, Women and Child Development Department, Mission Shakti Department, that is Women Empowerment Department, Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises Department. So many galaxy of development departments with us to work in Odisha. They all encourage supply and consumption of fish. Another key to success was that government's partnership with technical organizations such as WorldFish and ICR institutes, that is National Research Institutes, to bridge the technical gaps and sustain government programs to achieve impacts at the scale for state-level transformations. These approaches are relevant to many other states in India, in which aquatic food systems are integral for nourishing people and improving livelihoods. Key takeaway is we must promote nutritious fish as life-changing, nutritious solution for a well-nourished population. And we must have the cross-sectoral integrated partnerships needed to drive the transformation across the food systems from production to consumption. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Arun, for the presentation and for sticking to the time limit as well. And I think your case study was the perfect example of this holistic nature and the integration that is needed, right, to achieve sustainable and healthy diets. Last, but definitely not the least, let me welcome Jen Jarrett Lovewell, who is the Chief Nutrition Officer at Real Good Fish. Now, she's going to be giving the private sector perspective. Jen?
Thank you, Finn, and thank you for everyone else joining us from around the world for this very important and inspiring topic today. I'm actually going to spend some time to show you a very short video that we created about a program named Beta Tray. And this was created at the Monterey School District in Monterey, California, where actually 7 out of 10 children qualify for the Skill Meal program, which means that they live around the poverty line. And also means that they rarely had access to fresh food, including fresh fish, albeit being in a coastal community. So this program was created to really make the connections between fishermen and students and get those students adequate nutrition through local seafood supply chains. So Alessandro, please start the video.
Seafood is one of the healthiest foods that you can eat. It's loaded with omega-3 oils, protein, and all kinds of minerals. And it's a staple protein for billions of people in the world, and it's also a special centerpiece for celebration. Unfortunately, seafood has become a global commodity that produces a tremendous amount of waste and does unnecessary harm to people and the planet. It's become an industry that places value only on profit and not on the health of our communities, our children, or the ocean. At Real Good Fish, we're working to change our broken seafood system to put values like community and stewardship of the ocean back into our seafood. We call it Valueful Seafood. In 2012, we started out by connecting fishermen to local communities through our community-supported fishery. In the course of this work, we learned that school kids rarely have the opportunity to enjoy or learn about local seafood. In school districts like Monterey and Oakland Unified, about 70% of the students qualify for free or reduced meals. This means that many of these children are living at or below the poverty line. Now, public schools only receive $1.25 per student for lunch, including milk. We decided to try to improve this situation by providing local seafood to schools. We source grenadier, which is a mild, flaky white fish caught in the deep canyons of the Monterey Bay. It's the bycatch of the black cod fishery, which is normally thrown back in the water dead and wasted. We realized that there's an opportunity here to take this fish and serve a population in need. And now we buy it from our fishermen partners. We have it filleted locally and are providing a delicious local seafood product that schools can afford and that children love. Our members, they can support the Beta Trade program by choosing to add an additional $1.25 to their share to purchase a fish lunch for public school children and bring fishermen into the classroom. At Real Good Fish, we're working to provide our community with the most valuable seafood in the world, seafood that celebrates all members of our community and all creatures in our ocean.
Thank you. And when we started this Beta Trade program, I'd been really successful on getting local produce and local chicken, local beef, grass-fed beef into the school meal program, but had a really difficult time sourcing local seafood, even being in a coastal community that had been founded on commercial fishing, just given the global industrial nature of the seafood supply chain. So it took a lot of talking to people and finding innovative solutions, which was found with the a bycatch species, which was being caught along with a more targeted black cod fishery. And these fishermen were bringing in a wonderfully nutritious, wonderful, great to work with, very mild, flaky fish called grenadier, which mild and flaky sounds perfect to me for children. Being, into trying it. And so finding that solution, working together with local fishermen and finding a product that we could save from going to waste and instead feed, a vulnerable population of children. And I was told by many of my colleagues and other people in the community that kids just don't like fish, or that that kids aren't going to eat it. So when we piloted this program, we actually sold more fish tacos than pizza that day, and we made a very good pizza. So it made it, it showed that this was really possible. And the other thing I want to highlight is that to complete the circle, we also invited fishermen into the classroom so they would speak to kids and bring their gear and their cool nets and their ropes and teach students about life on the ocean. And that was one, to really connect them with the food that they were about to eat, because creating that connection between students and their food, I think, is also a really important part of getting student buy-in and getting them excited and getting them to want to try something. And also to inspire the next generation of ocean stewards and maybe even the next generation of fishermen, because very similar to farmers, the average age of fishermen is getting much older, and we're seeing less and less people getting into the industry. So also having a program where we could potentially inspire the next generation of sustainable fishermen was an important part to really complete this circle. So that's about our Beta Trade program, and I'm looking forward to any questions. And again, thanks to everyone for joining around the world.
Thanks so much, Jen, for joining at a very, very, very early hour during, a personal trip. So we really appreciate you taking the time. I'm now going to take about 20 minutes or so to ask a couple of rounds of questions to our speakers. We're running a little bit late, so I'm going to hopefully not rush through you, but maybe try and push you, nudge you a little bit more to try and stick to your time. But I would really like, this moderated discussion to be a real discussion. So I would actually encourage the panelists to respond to each other's answers and build on them. And if you want to speak, I would actually, urge you to just raise your hand, like physically like this, so that I can see who's raised your hand and I'll bring you in. Adeline, I know, you're still trying to sort out your internet connection. So you can just click raise your hand on the Zoom. If the video doesn't work, I will bring you in. Now, the first question I have is that, one thing that struck me while I was listening to all your presentation is that it is possible to achieve sustainable, healthy diets. From your experience, what were the policies, government policies that sort of made this target achievable? What didn't make it possible? What can other countries learn from the experiences that you have had? And I would really like to request our speakers to spend no more than 2 minutes each to answer these questions. And actually, Shakuntala, if you don't mind, can I come to you first to sort of again set the scene, and then I'll ask other speakers to contribute.
Thank you, Thin. And today we've heard wonderful examples. And if from where I stand with the work I do on aquatic food systems, I want to draw on 2 examples. Or the one that Arun Padaya gave from Odisha, which stretches across so many different sectors of the state government and brings in the communities, women groups, the private sector, and the poor and vulnerable through the school feeding programs and the mother and child health programs. So that's an excellent example that other states can follow, that other nations can follow. Another example I want to bring forward, which we haven't heard today about, but with you and I have talked about, Thin, is the example from Cambodia on community fish refuge and what role that has played within the management of fisheries in Cambodia, and also linking that to government and UNICEF programs, where because of the evidence of the roles of aquatic foods and animal source foods, as Laura has talked about, shows that in the treatment of malnourished children, aquatic foods, dried fish powder can replace milk powder 100%, with dried fish powder being a locally sourced food. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Shakuntala. Who wants to go next? Does anybody wants to volunteer, or shall I start sort of asking each one by name, whichever you prefer? Okay, I mean, Shakuntala has talked about fish, so I actually want to hear about livestock. So Adeline, would you like to go next? And then perhaps I'll go to Laura afterwards.
Thank you. As I presented the GIRINHA program, this program was aiming at reducing the poverty through daily cattle fishing, farming. Also, those people from poor family who benefited from GIRINHA were participating in decision-making for those in the, and environment protection, and also improving agricultural productivity through the use of manure as fertilizer. The inclusion of the SPCC has also contributed more to the focus on the use of animal source food consumption in improving the nutritional status of children. The SPCC also does not only focusing on milk consumption, but also other animal source food consumption, such as eggs, meat, fish, and so on and so forth. So families were encouraged to diversify the diets of their young children as well. This means that the government of Rwanda has different policies being implemented through the National Child Development Agency, like the community-based nutrition program, where in community, they usually conduct a monthly cooking demonstration session. And we make sure that the maternal and infant and the young child feeding practices, counseling cards, which is being used by the community health workers in delivering messages, include also the component of animal source food consumption among children. And also the community health workers at community level, they are mainly involved in education sessions, specifically encouraging mothers to provide animal source food among the food they provide to their children. Mm-hmm. We also have another thing, which is called imihigo, or performance contracts, where every year, from the village level, from the household, community health workers, cell level, sector level, all are involved are involved in signing performance contracts. And the district level also signed the performance contract with the president of Rwanda, which means that those in Mihigo, they are going to be evaluated on those performance contracts. So among the key interventions which are part of this Imihigo, game nutrition and animal source food consumption is included. We also have another policy, which is called the District Plan to Eliminate Malnutrition, where from district level up to village level, we have a committee. The committee is in charge of implementing all interventions aiming at reducing and improving nutritional status of children. We do plan together with district and other decentralized entities on the nutrition interventions through those DPM. And we do have a DPM scorecard, which is being used to assess or to monitor and evaluate how the interventions, the activities that were planned under those district plan to eliminate malnutrition have been achieved very well.
Thank you.
It means that the involvement of community health workers and households in those through Imihigo, it promotes the community engagement, accountability, and ownership. And this leads to the improvement in animal source food consumption.
Thank you. Thanks, Adeline. Laura, anything you'd like to add in terms of policy? I mean, that was quite a comprehensive list of what Rwanda is doing, right?
Yes, I think I have very little more to add to the previous two speakers. I think that it's important in terms of policy to involve policymakers actually in research. In my experience at country levels, when policymakers draw from evidence, see the effects of small and medium scale production of animal source foods on human nutrition, policy can be effective. And at the global level, with the UN discussion papers as an example, sort of setting that normative guidelines, drawing again from evidence that clearly shows the benefits of these foods in human nutrition. That's all. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much. Anything else you want to add, Arun, Jan, and Julie? Jan, please go ahead.
Sure. So I also one of the questions was about challenges to our program, and I'd say for the U.S. National School Lunch Program, budget is a huge challenge. As mentioned in the video, we have $1.25 to feed each student, which in the U.S. is about this cost on the general market of an apple. But in the school meal program, that $1.25 has to actually provide the entree, the fruit, vegetable, and the milk. So that can be very challenging to create a meal of healthy, nutritious food that meets those guidelines. And one thing that, policy or program that we've had a very long time here in the US that really helps support that is our commodity program. So the US government works with farmers across the country to purchase surplus product at the end of a season and then provides that to schools at a free or very, very small cost. And those things are really able to be paired and developed with other healthy, nutrient-dense foods to create a well-rounded meal for that program to meet that budget. So that's something that works really well in the U.S. school program.
Great, thank you. Arun, Julie, anything you want to add? No? Okay, let's move on to the next question. And, this is also because of another common theme that I heard from the presentations. It's this involvement of smallholders and how it can help transform both the nutritional outcomes and livelihoods, as well as community cohesion. And I think the question I have is, how can we make sure that these programs, the programs that take into account smallholders, whether they're fisher folk or farmers, how can we make sure that these programs are the norms and not the exception? What do we need to be doing differently? Laura, can I come to you first? Because, you've been doing a lot of research on this issue.
Yeah, no, I think the first important point to make on this question is that people don't realize the extent to which small and medium scale producers contribute to human nutrition globally. So somewhere between 50 and 70% of all nutrients are coming from small scale production. And yet, ironically, these households tend to be the most malnourished globally. So I think it's a really important question then that we need to focus on. The other element of small scale production that people don't realize is the innovation that can happen at that scale. So I think investing in extension services to small scale production, learning from them, engaging, and very importantly, ensuring that some of the high quality produce that they provide is kept for their own family to ensure that young child nutrition especially is taken care of. Thank you. I see Dr. Phil's.
Thank you. Shakuntala, do you want to go next, or Arun? I was going to come to either you or Arun because I wanted to hear from the aquatic food side.
Quickly, and I'll talk about the people, about having people-centered approaches, about making sure communities are engaged, not only in presenting their challenges and the problems they face, but working with communities on using traditional knowledge and local knowledge to find the solutions. We are not good at that. We are good at listening to the issues, the problems, and then going away in our labs and our offices and designing the solutions and bringing them back to the communities. That style of working must change. And both the two examples, the one that Arun gave from Odisha, and the one I gave from Cambodia on the community fish refuge, they are based on very, very strong cohesiveness in communities and community associations.
Thank you. Arun, would you like to add anything from your experience, with the Odisha project and others as well?
Yeah, in Odisha especially, we have more than 80% of our farmers are small and marginal scale farmers. And this holds good with our marine fishers also, coastal fishers. Most of them are 80%, 85% of them are traditional fishermen who use traditional boats for fishing and all. So, one good example is that with respect to the policy by government of Odisha is that Farm Pond Plus. Agriculture department every year digs about 100,000 farm ponds. These are all small ponds of 10 decimals, it's about 400 square meter tanks. Small farmers typically have about one hectare to 2 hectare land. So in that they construct these tanks under India's largest employment guarantee scheme, involving all the local villagers. And these tanks are for harvesting the rainwaters and for climate resilience. And when they are doing so, what government is thinking is not only for irrigation to their backyard, the agriculture lands, but also Farm Pond Plus. Plus means in the sense kitchen garden, a small garden for that, and fish inside this particular pond, in order to increase the local availability of nutritious food. So this goes directly to their household consumption. What I think is that when the government brings in appropriate policies and schemes. Along with that, good training and SBCC, basically awareness program among the villagers and also the farming community. I think it will be very successful in bringing the nutrition sensitive, gender sensitive, and also environmentally sound practices for sustainable food production. So in the nutshell, what I want to say is that science, government, and the community should work together to bring in the transformational changes to get the nutritional gains, income gains among the vulnerable communities in countries like India and other countries, Asian countries. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Arun. Julie, Jen, Adeline, anything else would you like to add? Anything you want to say in particular? No? Okay, we will move on. Before we open up the Q, I know we have a lot of Q&As actually coming in, but I just want to ask one last question, and particularly to Julie. This one is, we've talked about, Julie, you talk quite at length about some of the, challenges that you were facing as a young farmer. What can we do to help this, next generation of farmers? Is there, you talk about three big issues, but, is there one thing that is holding you back in particular? Is there any particular obstacle that you want removed from your path? What recommendation you would say, like, we would like this to happen?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very nice, very good question. First of all, it's to work together and to listen to us. Most of the time, like it's more governmental, but it's they think that it's our reality. It's us who worked on the farm every day. So we have to be here. We have to work together for long term. Also, that most of the time that's in the moment. They make a program. They make it's now, but like climate change, and that's a big issue, and that's a big. We have to look forward to see where it goes and where. With what is the need that we have to have. So that's one of the things, to work together, to be sure that everyone thinks about us who are in the foundation. We work a lot. We don't have a lot of times to go like today. Like it's perfect to listen to us and to make sure that to think about a farmer who works on the ground, on the field. That's true, and that's the same thing for the question before, that to be sure that like the small farm, to make sure that in the trade agreements, make sure that we bring back we things that we don't. If we do it, to make sure that the things sometimes it's low cost, so we have to make sure that the cost is down, and that's harder for a small farm to make sure that the competition with the products outside the country. So that's for the future. It's more to be sure that to look forward in the future. It's not just now and 4 years program, and most of the time they make program that they think that it will be good for us, but that there is small parts who are not, and maybe sometimes it's bigger problem and bigger issues. So that's my point. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Julie. So essentially, think long term and just make sure that you are part of the discussion. There's something that always gets discussed, right? Nothing about us without us, which is applicable to so many different situations. And I think this is probably the same as well. Now, thank you so much to all our speakers. We are running a little bit out of time, so we're going to move on to the Q&A portion. And there's actually a lot of questions coming in. I'm going to try and take as much as possible, but we might have to rush through a little bit. I'm going to try and, in the interest of time, I am going to target the questions to individual speakers. But of course, please feel free to add in if you want to say something. Again, just raise your hand. I'm going to go through 3 questions first. First is actually for Adeline. Adeline, there was a part of the audience member who, thank you for the presentation, but also wanted to know if you measure the nutritional status before and after and see the difference. I think you talked about how, they're more, I think, are taking milk, but I'm not sure if you actually talked about, before and after, and if you can perhaps talk about that. I'm going to go through three, I think, questions, so that while I'm going through the questions, you can be, planning your answers. Another question was quite interesting. It's coming through. Just give me one moment because there's a lot coming through. So, and this is somebody saying, you've talked about animals and, aquatic sources as source of food, but what about plants? What about, there are lots of several indigenous plant species, which are food crops, but which are neglected. What role do they have to play? And that's number two. There's also a lot of questions, Shakuntala and Jen as well, coming in around fisheries and making sure that aquaculture and aquatic foods are truly sustainable and not polluted and doesn't come from are not affected by pollutants. If you have any thoughts on any of that, that would be great. So perhaps we'll start off with Adeline first, if she can talk about whether there were any measurements on nutritional status.
Thank you for an interesting question. The trial was only focusing on animal source food consumption and dietary diversity for the pregnant, lactating women and young children. There was no anthropometric measurements taken. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Now, who wants to take the question around why, talking about animals and aquatic, but not plant? Shakuntala, I saw that you have answered briefly in the chat. Maybe you want to start that off, and I'll ask others if they want to come in.
Thank you, Thin. And that's a move that we have made, both in WorldFish and in the one CGIAR, and acknowledging that the narrative must change from just fish, seafood, to aquatic foods, which include animals, plants, microorganisms, our seaweed. If we would look, I've talked about the coalition from the UN Food Systems Summit. If I would like to see a movement on that, I would say, let's look at seaweed as a food within school feeding programs, as we have for generations with milk powder and other foods. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Laura.
I think it's a really important question, so I did want to weigh in on this. It's as Dr. Phil said, we have to think about plants, animals, fungi, the whole array of foods that we have in our ecosystems, and think about dietary diversity as it relates to biodiversity. So I don't think any one of us is promoting any one food. Eggs aren't going to save the world necessarily. It's the diverse array of foods that human beings should be eating, and including those indigenous plants that somebody raised that question for. So it's a really important question, and that's what sustainable healthy diets should include, is that diverse array of foods. So thank you.
And then if I should add to that,
yes, of course.
It's just not the one food. That's not how we eat. We eat foods on a plate, diverse, nutritious foods, how they complement each other and how they form together in the dish. The recipes that you cook with many foods together, spices as well, and condiments, and then how you combine those foods in a meal.
Thank you so much. The last question I was asking about was, there were quite a lot of people who were asking about, making sure that aquaculture, and aquatic foods are not affected by things like pollutants and stuff like that. Shakuntala, Arun, Jen, do you want to take that? Yeah, Jen, please go ahead.
Sure. And so I think a lot of times when we hear about pollutants in the ocean, it comes through bioaccumulation, which we see a lot more often with the larger fish and less often with the smaller fish. So again, the recommendation is always to seek out, the smaller fish on the food chain, the anchovies, the sardines, the mackerel, which also are highly abundant and tend to be chock full of incredible nutrition. So really having that as a guiding force of fish to seek out. And the other thing is we work with the school district and with Real Good Fish, we work really close with local fishermen. We're purchasing directly from them. And these are fishermen who, are in the fishing grounds every week. They see the quality and the conditions of the ocean. So having that ability to have that direct link with the food producer and really know the product that we're buying and selling and providing makes such a huge difference. So having that, a shorter supply chain, the fishermen are also fishing just off the coast. They're not going out for months at a time. So there is a very intimate knowledge with the habitat and environment when you work with these small scale food producers that can't be replicated or overlooked.
Thank you. And I know, Shakuntala, Arun, yes, you guys are all about small fish as well, right? So I'm sure you agree with that. Arun, please go ahead.
Yeah, the question I see here is that how to minimize the impact of polluting agents from aquaculture system. The most of the pollutants are coming from intensive and semi-intensive systems, and that is and it is mostly the organic waste, feed waste. Okay, so that's what I'm seeing in aquaculture, and we have it is mandatory, for example, in India, to have effluent treatment ponds in place to control the organic waste released to the outside the farming system. That is one thing. And within, say, modified, extensive, and traditional systems, this kind of organic waste is very limited, I can say. And by using the better management practices, that's good aquaculture practices, what we say, GAP, and giving a lot of trainings and kind of hand-holding supports to the farming community at cluster level, cluster management systems. If we can bring it, I think definitely there will be kind of cluster level good practices in place that can be practiced, and that can definitely minimize the negative impacts from aquaculture, especially the pollutants coming out of it. So it is happening here. And if you see the carp culture system in India, which is there for last 40-45 years, it has been very systematically, sustainably it is going on without further intensification. It is very limited. It is what I can say modified extensive. So it's feeding all Indian requirement. Say about nearly about 10 million tons of fish is produced in this very environmentally friendly way. So that's what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arun. I would really like to have taken more questions because there's a lot more. There's one asking on pesticides to Julie. There's one asking about bycatch to Jen. Unfortunately, we are going to be running quite short of time. So, I do apologize for not being able to take questions. If any of the speakers are willing to go into chat and respond, directly, you are welcome to do so. But we have two closing, reflections and thoughts from the European Commission as well as UN Nutrition. But first, I would like to ask our speakers for one last question. And if you could take no more than 30 seconds to answer this, I would be eternally grateful. Essentially, if you have one message, one recommendation, one key takeaway that you would like the audience from this session to go with at the end of it, what would it be? I'm going to go on the order of the speakers this morning. Shakuntala?
Thanks, Tin. And for me, it's diversity of systems. And let's start with consumption and move backwards to supply chains and production, and also bringing the consumers and the people at all levels of the food system. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Oh, you're still on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mine is also diversity. So my message is to eat across the ecosystem, plants, animals, fungi. So diet diversity and biodiversity can simultaneously be achieved. Thanks.
Adeline?
I just want to say that male engagement is very key in improvement of nutritional status of children. And also, I just want to emphasize that the community have to own and participate in the interventions designed for them, for the programs to be successful. Thank you.
Lovely. Julie?
Yeah, thank you. Me too. So the diversity for sure. And again, working together, we all wanted to feed the world. So that's we all have the same goal. So that's like this morning. That's a nice thing to share and to work together and to be sure that we all goes in the same way.
Arun?
Yeah, in order to bring in this diversity, it is most important that the convergence between different stakeholders is very important, and that is the way forward for impacts at the scale. Thank you.
Jen?
So my closing thought would be that there is a lot of food out there that is not being consumed, and it's only nutrition and it's only food if it's being consumed. And to everyone to think innovatively and to look at where there's inefficiencies and waste in the system, because we might not need to create new food systems, but just consume the food that is already being produced and looked at supply chains and reducing waste as a part of a sustainable future.
Great, thank you so much. I would now like to invite Leonard Mizzi, who is the head of unit at the European Commission, Directorate General for International Cooperation and Development, for his reflections. Leonard, what do you think the EU can do, or is the EU going to do to make sure that sustainable, healthy diets are a reality across its member countries, as well as in low and middle income countries? And if I could request you to take no more than 2 to 3 minutes, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Tin, and thanks for a very dense discussion. What is the EU going to do? We have 80 billion to program globally, nationally, regionally in the period 2021-2027, which we will be unveiling as from next year. We are finalizing the programming. In terms of sustainable agri-food systems, I think the key words that Shankutala said with Arun is multi-stakeholder approaches. This is not going to be easy. We did this on cocoa. If we want to have a multi-stakeholder, interdisciplinary, interdepartmental approach, this is hard work. We are not there, despite all work about coalitions and coalitions of action, national pathways. Very few countries and realities have this systemic thinking. But if we really want to be inclusive in a COVID, post-COVID context, it has to be inclusive, it has to be gender mainstream, and it has to empower youths. Youths will not be engaged in sustainable agri-food systems if they don't see a business solution to what we are discussing. I haven't heard much about the cost of a diverse diet, because this is not cost-free. Diversity of diets and short supply circuits are not cost-free or low cost. So it's important that we also show the evidence, and that is why our Commission President unveiled a portfolio to support the CGIAR to the tune of 140 million in the period 2021-2027. We want to give a clear signal as European Union to research and to a typology of research also, which will look primarily but not only, but primarily at agroecology and innovative approaches, which take into account the challenges around food systems, but also looking into carbon sequestration, because I think this is also key, One Health, and also sanitary and phytosanitary issues. The challenge around integration of markets is regional and intra-regional trade. We didn't discuss it today, we didn't have time, but for example, in Africa, if we really want to dynamize food systems, healthy diets, and there is big potential because it's around urban middle income, but also demographic challenges, it has to be intra-regional trade. Intra-regional trade in agriculture, agri-food, and aquatic systems in Africa is very low, well below 20%. And this is being stalled by unsmart policies, unsmart subsidies, but also barriers across the African continent. We, as European Union, want to use the EU-Africa Summit in the first quarter of 2022 to look into food systems from a systems approach where we start really dismantling the barriers to really create such regional markets. And the discussions today are clearly food for thought. The work that needs to be done is hard because it's really need to involve everyone across the value chains, and there are many value chains. One of the initiatives we have is Fish for ACP, which is a project with the German government and with the OACPS around 12 value chains in fisheries. And today's contributions clearly is food for thought. And we look forward also to engaging with all of you in our delegations as the programming is unfolded. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Leonard, for outlining what EU, of course, is a very important development partner to a lot of these projects and programs and what you're planning to do. May I now invite Steneke Onema, who is the Executive Secretary of UN Nutrition, for closing remarks?
Sure, and thank you so much. Thank you to all the panelists, all the speakers. I mean, of course, many of you I know already, but every day, every moment when I listen to you, I learn new things. I'm honored to say a few closing remarks and try in an attempt to try and summarize the event. We discussed sustainable healthy diets as really the linking pin between health, nutrition, food, and environment. And there's so many elements there. It's not really black and white. There's so many colors there, and if I may say so, even aquatic foods are not just blue foods. It's all about the diversity, and that is how we should transform our systems, the livestock, the terrestrial systems, the aquatic systems, all about embracing the diversity that's out there for improving our diets, making them more sustainable and more healthy. And I did hear the remarks about making them more sustainable isn't possible without good governance. So that is an important element as well. What I like to add there is that I heard a lot about local supply chains, local sources, regional sources, and I think that's an important one. If you read the definition of sustainable healthy diets, it is about more local elements. It has so many co-benefits also with regard to, you know, allowing the economy to benefit locally as well, allowing the people to benefit in that local setting. So how to do that? Already Leonard alluded to that a bit, and I just wanted to add one word there. Let's try to develop food-based dietary guidelines in countries to help people, help consumers make their choices. What is a healthy diet? What is a sustainable diet? What is available locally to help producers know what to produce, what diversity is in products is needed and is possible to produce in a sustainable way there, and also to help policymakers to support these processes, to create and change investments, as was said as well, to allow this to happen. So we said local, but let's jump to global for a moment. We just came out of the Food Systems Summit and quite a few lessons were learned there. It was a good moment to create momentum for food and nutrition, for a food system point of view. And there were some lessons for nutrition as well. And we should keep those. And there was a lot of energy as well. Coalitions have been formed. Coalitions are being built as we speak. And that partnership is so important, not just across sectors, but also, as I heard in this event, with science supporting smallholder producers and also supporting governments to do the right thing and to help innovation, of course. So that Food System Summit has brought us something. But now sustainable healthy diets and possibly a healthy diet coalition should bring us forward and shouldn't stop here. We have the COP, the biodiversity COP, coming up this week, biodiversity, diverse diets. We have the climate COP coming up early November. Food systems are so important in the climate COP. We need to embrace that concept of sustainable healthy diets to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. Last but not least this year, and then we would continue next year, is the Nutrition for Growth Summit. In that one, nutrition obviously is centerpiece, but we should not forget that systemic point of view that we have learned over the past few days. Just one other word about that equity aspects that we touched on today. At the beginning of the event, but now also at the end, there was a call for remaining realistic. At this very moment, 3 billion people do not have access to a sustainable healthy diet. So we need changes. We need to transform that food system. We heard a few tools. We heard beautiful examples because we know these smallholder families, these smallholder producers need to be able to nourish their families. School kids, they need to have access to that sustainable healthy diets to nourish themselves, not just physically, but also mentally in order to grow to their full potential. We need to nourish the women to support them, support themselves, their families and their communities. We all need to enjoy the right to food. So let me close there and wish you a beautiful rest of the day.
Thank you so much for that summary, Stenike. And of course, thanks so much also to all of our speakers. Can we give them a virtual round of applause, please? And of course, thank you to all our audience as well for your participation and for staying longer than the original plan for the time. We really appreciate it. It's been my pleasure to moderate today's event. And I wish you all the best for the rest of the week. Goodbye.